Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. Hi, Renee.
Hi.
Hi, Cara. Good morning. Hi, Patrick. Welcome. Good morning, Amy. Good morning, Lauren. Welcome,
Hello.
everyone. Hi, Kiara. If you wouldn't mind, everyone, please toss in the chat where you're coming from, where you're joining us from this morning. Good morning, Patrick. Hi, Ryan. Hi, Dane. Good to see you. I got some more in the waiting room. Molly is joining. Toronto. Welcome, Ryan. That's my hometown. Yeah. We got Lauren from Illinois. Welcome. Minneapolis. Greg. Welcome.
Nice.
Still got people joining. Here's Ben. Dev from Tampa. Hello. Hi, Renee from San Francisco. Welcome. Maui. Joe. Welcome from Maui. Awesome. All right. Well, we're going to get started here. My name is, could you go off screen share, Mel? And so people can see me for a second.
Yeah,
Thanks.
I think so.
Great. So hello, everyone. My name is Will Sachs, and I'm the founder and CEO of Fulcrum Venture Accelerator. We are an accelerator for mission-driven entrepreneurs who are raising seed funding. And we've existed since 2019. Hi, Luciano. Great to see you, my friend. We have some alumni joining us on the call. So every 3 months at Fulcrum, we run a cohort of founders through our fundraising mastery program. I see some of our graduates on the call here, and our graduates have already raised, hey, Ben, good to see you. Our graduates have raised about $30 million in seed funding and gone on to create some incredible companies. So if you're interested in learning more about fundraising mastery, please get in touch with me or someone on our team. We just opened our early enrollment period for our next cohort that launches on March 23rd, and we'd love to meet you. But that's not why we're here today. We're here today to talk about pitch decks. And to do that, I'm going to introduce Melanie Platt, our venture partner here at Fulcrum, who has an incredible background and skill with pitch decks and incredible perspective. So I'm going to pass it over to you, Mel, to introduce yourself and give some overview of your background, and then off we go into how to create a winning pitch deck that gets you funded.
Yeah, awesome. Oh my gosh, it's so great to see this many people, and I see more kind of piling in. So I'll just start. Thanks, Will, for that introduction. My name is Melanie. I'm the venture partner over at Fulcrum Venture Accelerator. They are fantastic. I joined, I help with admissions, and I also do some coaching with them, and I also help create their pitch decks. So my background, I spent the majority of my career at a SF-based boutique. They call themselves a boutique fund to fund. But by the time I left, we managed 1.5 billion in AUM. And I was one of 10 people at the very beginning when I started. So I like to think of it as an MBA on steroids, except without the $300,000 in debt. And from there, I really got a great taste of what it's like to be an investor. So it's twofold. I have experience working with our own investors, right? So our own LPs, for a fund that looks more like endowments, foundations, pension funds, and helping to raise a $250 million fund. So I understand how intense it is to try and get funding. And then on the other side, I had deal flow come my way. So pitch decks would land on my desk. Over time, I reviewed, hundreds and hundreds. And I can tell you from someone who's sitting there, they go, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, in probably under 2 minutes. So while I was working there, I saw there was a huge disconnect between what founders think they should showcase in a pitch and what investors really want to see and hear. And so that goes for your pitch deck too, right? And also once you show up in the room. And so I've, over time, just kind of built this framework for what really creates a winning pitch deck and what's going to make investors tick, basically. I would say a lot of things that I've seen in the past is just 12 slides of like deep tech product, right? But there's no signs of how much money you're going to make the investor, no stats, it's not clear. It's like a bunch of scribbles. There's so many things that can go wrong. And I've heard from a lot of people actually, why do I even need to put the time and the money into a pitch deck? I can just, type it down really quick on some slides and send it over. And the truth is, that's the first image that you send to an investor, right? That's their first look into who you are as a founder. And at such an early stage in creating a company, the main focal point for how investors think to invest is focused on you, the founder, right? And also the company too, but you don't have that much data to be able to convince them that this is going to be $1 billion company. So that first initiation that you do with this pitch deck means a lot. So that's my introduction. And yeah, I'll start from there. Let me just share my screen really quick to get into here.
I love that point, Mel, that the pitch deck is often the first thing, or one of the first things that investors see. And so it's an opportunity to make a great impression, also an opportunity to totally make a bad impression and scupper your chances.
Yes, 100%. And, so we'll get into the details of that as well. I'm going to take questions at the end of this, just so everybody knows. If you guys want to jot down your questions on a piece of paper or pop them into the chat, we'll be sure to answer as many as we can at the very end of this, just to kind of keep the flow going. So great. We're just going to start off by talking about how fundraising is incredibly frustrating. So don't get discouraged, especially in this type of market, right? Like it seems as if that people are holding their purses close to their chest, right? But that doesn't mean that there's not a lot of capital still out there. There's plenty of money. That is not the problem. The problem is, how do you make yourself stand out in an environment like this? This is no longer 2008, 2009. This is a whole other new wave of startups and tech that is honestly incredibly competitive. I read somewhere that it used to take 100 investor meetings to be able to, close your seed round or pre-seed round. And now it takes, I'll just pause while we mute that person. Thank you. And now it takes around maybe 200. So it just takes time, right? And you don't need to get discouraged. As long as you're doing it where you're not dragging it out for a year, right? Like you can create the structures around you and your company to be able to really successfully do this in a fast way. So one is strategy, right? You don't want to just go into it blind. Really start to think about, who is your ideal investor? What do you want these relationships to look like? And understand that this takes a lot of time. We tell our founders that when you're fundraising, like it is pedal to the metal. Expect to, take anywhere between 40 to 70 hours a week. It just depends on the intensity of it. And also don't forget to network. Network with investors, but I would say, which some people kind of overlook, is also network with your peers, network with other founders who they might listen to your story and be like, oh yeah, that's great. I could actually give you a warm introduction to one of my investors who's really interested in climate tech or whatever. You really want to leverage those types of connections and foster your community, because those warm introductions get you way further than cold emails. So this is just to also say that venture firms are spending less time on decks than ever before. I was not a partner at a VC firm, yet I was still receiving pitch decks from a company. So if you think that these are going directly to, the head honchos, think again. So, if you're lucky, they are. And I'll go to the next slide. This was from TechCrunch, these statistics. I should have put a citation down here. But overall, the time spent on reviewing pitch decks has gone down significantly. So on unsuccessful pitch decks, people know within 2 minutes, right? And successful pitch decks, that's still gone down a significant amount. So you really only have a certain number of slides in to really wow them. And after that, you just kind of lose them. So making sure that you're creating something that really keeps them engaged. And the key here that I like to talk about is to produce FOMO. So fear of missing out. You don't need to give them all of your financials. You don't need to give them in-depth analysis of your go-to-market strategy. You need to create something that's going to make them want to get on a call with you so that you can then convince them as the founder why they need to invest. All right, we're going to pause here just for a second. I'm going to kind of go over what I call as the basic framework for how to build a clean, concise, engaging pitch deck. And I'll touch on a little bit of all of these. Of course, there's variation. Of course, sometimes it goes over 10 pages, but this, if you can follow this framework, you'll be on a better path to success than just kind of throwing information around or having 12 slides on just your product. So a lot of things that I've seen in the past is they have 20 to 40 slides of information on their deck, right? No one's going to read that. I can tell you right now. You might tell me, but Mel, I have really technical investors. They want to know all of this information. Or what about, these other types of investors? You might think that putting in more information is going to be better to capture a larger audience. I'm going to tell you right now, that's not the case. You can always supplement information further, create an appendix, ask them if they need any other additional information, but it still comes down to time and understanding as quickly as possible why you are the person to make this potentially $1 billion company, right? Unless you're going for angels, in which case it can be lower, but that's what investors are really into at the very end of the day, right? A return. And with that comes minimal text and images. You don't need crazy graphs. You don't need, insane pictures of your product. You want to try and keep it as simple and concise as possible. And with that, like I touched on before, I've seen so many pitch decks, I get to the end of it and it's like, okay, well, what's the market? What's the potential here? What's the upside? How much money does this have for us to make, right? So there's no dollar signs or statistics about, what population this affects. And I kind of get to the end of it and think like, what's the impact? So what's the impact on the investor and what's the impact on whatever market you're grabbing? So that's kind of like the overall broader approach to this. And I'll just kind of dig down a little bit deeper onto each of these 10 points. So when I say mission, I really mean a 5-word headliner for what your company does. You want to put that on your title slide. That's the first thing they're going to see. For me, mine is I help founders fundraise, right? That doesn't leave a lot of questions. It's not like I raise money for those in need. That's too vague, right? Like I consolidate it down so that when they open that deck, it's right there underneath the name of your company. And then we'll talk about the problem. And by the way, we're going to go into examples of all of these. When you talk about the problem, it's important to drive the impact, right? Make it kind of hit them in the stomach about why this is a problem that's really important and needs to get fixed right now. And then from there, when you go into your solution, don't forget that you need to directly tie whatever the solution is to your problem. So I also see sometimes founders get distracted about what they think the problem is or the problem at large, but they're only focusing on a really small part of the solution. You want to almost draw a line to these two and make sure whatever you're saying in the problem statement, you want to tie directly to your solution. In your solution, again, we're going to talk about how concise this should be, and I'll show you examples. This is not an opportunity to show 12 slides of product. This is not an opportunity to share a bunch of diagrams. This is an opportunity to share in as few words as possible why this is going to solve the problem above. And then next, we'll talk about the why now stage. I'd also like to just pause here and mention these can be in different orders. 1, 2, and 3 are generally first, but you can massage it into what works for you. So the why now is basically, we're in a downturn. What is the urgency for these investors to invest today? Why is this a problem? And speaking to, this is where you really want to throw in those statistics and dollar signs, right? If you can talk about, how large this problem is in terms of dollar signs, that's great. Target market and opportunity. There's something called TAM, SAM, SOM. I suggest every founder put that in their pitch deck. So that is total addressable market, serviceable addressable market, and serviceable obtainable market. So it's basically, it's an equation, but it's basically calculating down what is the huge larger scope of your market, of who your audience is. And then all the way down at the bottom is who are the people that you can capture within that audience. And this gives an investor a good idea of, okay, is it 500 billion or is it 10 million? So that's kind of where we go there. And then your business model. What is your go-to market strategy? Is it just ads? Are you, is it through channel partners? What does your growth look like in 5 years? Do you have unit economics? How much per customer are they going to bring in? Even if you don't necessarily have sales yet, this is really important to put in so the investor knows that you're thinking about this and about the potential upside. So traction and validation, this is another slide that's just, even if you don't have necessarily revenue or you haven't launched your product, this is where you put in LOIs, letters of intent. You put in the data from your beta testing, whatever you can grab that has proven to you that your product works is where you want to put in this slide. From there, you're going to talk about the competitive landscape, which is what is your product and how does it differ from what's out there? And why is yours so unique? And we can talk about that a little bit more too. 9 is your team. Your team slide is an opportunity for you to obviously showcase yourself and only the key crucial other team members. So CTO, CMO, people like that, and maybe a couple advisors. And you want to kind of hit them with a punch about with what's really important about each of these people and what they deliver and bring to the team based on the relevant experience. And lastly, 10, invest in the use of funds. Will and I go back and forth on this one. I think it's great to have as an investor when I receive a pitch deck, how much are you even asking for? And how are you going to deploy it? Will's counter to that is don't tell them until you get on a call with them. Let them wonder, right? The least amount of information, like you don't need to give everything else on a silver platter, right? You can kind of keep some stuff to you so that they're engaged and they want to ask more questions. So yeah, I'm just going to pause there. Will, can you tell me where we're at in terms of time?
Yeah, it's 10:20 here in Colorado. So I think we're doing good.
Great. Okay, cool. Awesome. So we're going to go into examples now. I pulled these from the internet. They're widely dispensable. I'm sure I can post the links to these in the chats as well if you want to find them online. But this is a company called Suppleful. And I'm going to walk you through why I chose these per each slide. Suppleful, they tell you really clearly down here what they do and why. They make it easy for creators to launch their own private label brand. This gives me enough context to be like, great, I know what I'm going into before we even talk about the problem. You don't want to, they just need to know right off the bat. Don't confuse them. Tell them as clearly as you can, which can be hard, distilling it down into 5 or 6 words. But you really need to.
Can I say something about that, Mel?
Totally.
Yeah, so this is something that we hammer on again and again and again at Fulcrum is the first question that's in an investor's mind always is, what is this? Mm-hmm. Right? And so often we get sent decks and we go through the whole deck and we still can't answer that question. And so that's why it's so crucial to, at the very beginning, at the top on the first slide, just like Mel said, is to show exactly what it is that you're building with no ambiguity and no confusion. And that, then the investor can start to engage with it. But before that question gets answered, it's impossible to engage because they don't know what that is. So I love these example decks that you've chosen because they're so crisp and simple and communicate what the investor needs to know when they need to know it so that they can get led through that process of getting excited. So
yep, totally. Thanks, Will. This is also not an opportunity for you to explain in a diagram or a picture what you do. Keep this as clear as possible. Just write out in words what it is that you do. I've seen a few people where it's like, I'm going to show them through this image that we're, X, Y, and Z. No, don't get creative yet. Just tell them as simply as possible. So this is Mr. Beast. I actually personally had no idea who this man was, but apparently he's very, very successful. And what they're doing here is they're setting context. So this is not necessarily talking about the problem yet, but they're easing us into what the problem is going to be. So Mr. Beast easily launched his own brand because of the snacks because he's a superstar. And then we go into the problem. So the way that I think about a problem slide should be broken up into two sections at least. So you have the problem at large, which can be like, I don't know, 500 million people get sick from water in the US every year, and it's an issue. And then from there you get down further into the weeds about what are the specifics of those, like what are those specific problems that come up for it. So this is him going into depth a little bit more. You can see here, I'm not left with a lot of questions about what the problem is for this company. And I've had people come to me and be like, Mel, these are really simple slides. This is almost, it seems like someone, dumb did it. Like it's so stupidly simple, but it takes so much information to go from, what some people create as 20 to 40 slides for what their problem is, distilled down into 3 sentences. This is really difficult. But at the end of the day, this is how, in 2 minutes, they need to understand what's going on. And then again, remember how I talked about how the problem needs to directly relate to the solution? This is so simple. We turn from red for these to black. Like, I love this because it's so simple and it explains step by step from the one before exactly how they're going to solve this solution. I wrote this all over. I think I shared this for some CTOs or technical people who tend to dive a little bit deeper into the product. So no deep dive for product. You might see that a couple of times in this slide. And then we talk about the why now. So here it's like, this is where they're putting in the dollar signs, right? 60% of creators, they then put in a physical number, which is kind of starting to hint at the market too, are looking for new monetization opportunities. And they give 2 other examples about why this is the moment to invest in them. So this is there, like I mentioned before. I'm sorry, it's kind of blurry here. I believe this is, I can't really see what it says. This is talking about the market, right? So you have their market at large, and then you go all the way down to what is their serviceable, obtainable market. And what I love about these numbers, while an investor needs to see them, they're also kind of like, all right, it's pretty objective. Like anyone can kind of come up with something that's like whenever there's a TAM that's like $1 trillion, like, okay, how much research have you actually done to distill this down to really be clear about who your market is? So to do that and to make sure that they see that you've done your research, what I love about this is they put explanation for why these numbers are the way they are on the side, right? So, and that's how they break it down. How it works, this is probably one of my favorite slides ever. Like this is the most simple you can get for how a product works, right? We take this, then we turn it into this. Again, getting a product down to something that's this simple is really difficult. I see tons of decks that have arrows going this way and then left and then right. And then at the end, it's like a gold star, and it doesn't need to be that complicated. You don't need to go into, then our API integrates, and then from there we do it to this, and then we do it to this. Like just really simply explain what it's done, how it's done. And then from there, you can go into specifics later. How are they going to make their money? Like, again, really, really specific, right? I'm not left with a lot of questions about how they plan to make their revenue. This one, I go back and forth on. There's generally two different types of ways that you can do a competitive landscape slide. One is like this, an X and Y graph, right? Where you're able to showcase the different players in your space, but how you stand out amongst them. I personally like it more as a table where you have check marks, like green check marks for how yours stands out, and maybe like one check mark for how Amazon would stand out. Like they only encompass one part of that market. This to me can get a little intense too, where if you're putting huge players next to your name, it kind of makes me second guess how you're going to be able to compete against them, right? And it looks like there's already people in this space. So I'm hit or miss on this. There's a bunch of different ways that we could do it outside of that too, to really just drive the FOMO. which is we're the only company that does X, Y, and Z, right? And if they want to hear more about the competitive landscape, they can get on the call with you. This was another slide that I loved because they're explaining to the investor that, look, here are people out there who have done something really similar to what we create, and they've done it successfully. So it's explaining to them that like there are other opportunities out there, and look at these success stories, and we can be one of them, right? Be cautious that it's not too close to what you're doing in your market. But I thought this was an amazing example about how they've already seen success and they're going to be successful next. This slide, as an investor, I created this with the mind of an investor, and I loved it because inside here, this is explaining like, you know, where they're at, what they need for funds, right? And I love that they had click for details, which was a link to their financials. Amazing. It helps me as an investor understand, just understand the company more. Now that I am helping founders, this is a big don't do that because you don't want to give an investor any reason not to invest in your company, right? So if they find one thing wrong in those financials, they're like, nope, we don't want to see that. Don't share more than you have to, like share just enough to keep them enticed. So I used to have the slide saying, yes, do this. Now I say, no, don't do this, because you don't want to give them more information than needed. Great. And then from here, this breaks down exactly how they plan to utilize their capital over the next 18 months. Really clear and simple. I'm going to pause there, Will. I'm not sure where we're at in terms of time. I'm going to go through one more example. Do you have anything you'd like to add here?
Yeah. So just about this deck, like what I love about this deck is how clean and simple it is. And it's so much simpler and cleaner than most of the decks that we get sent at Fulcrum, and probably most of the decks that you see from people. And I think what we've talked about is it can be deceptively, like people think that making a deck that's this simple is easy, but it's actually not. It's way harder than having slides with all kinds of arrows and a jumble of different, you know, information and a deep dive on the product and headshots and all the stuff that we usually see in decks. These folks have taken the time to distill and trim and just take all that stuff out. So they're only giving the necessary information, and they're doing it in a way that's beautiful and compelling and that stimulates curiosity in the mind of the investor, so that by the time the investor gets to the end of the deck, they have just enough information to feel curious and want to learn more, and not too much information or enough information to say no or pass. So yeah, it's really—
Thank you. Yes, that's great.
It's really nice.
And part of the reason why Fulcrum brought me on is you can get a deck designer anywhere to do, you know, a beautiful deck for $250. But if you don't have someone who understands what an investor really needs to see, and more importantly, can look at your company holistically and distill it down into like the most crucial points, it's really hard for a founder to do that, honestly. Like to really bring it down selectively into, okay, what's really going to make a lasting punch? So, you know, we're able to do that at Fulcrum just because of our, you know, venture experience and coming at it from an objective view. But
yeah, and as founders,
anyways,
we get so attached, like,
yeah,
so we're so attached to these little hobby horses and things in our business. And sometimes it takes somebody else with a fresh perspective, and especially someone like you, Mel, who's seen this from the other side of the table, to confidently just say like, no, you need to take that out. Like that needs to come out.
yeah.
The founder might be like, no, but it needs to stay in. You're like, no, trust me, that needs to be out. And let's just keep it super simple and dialed so that investors can read this and feel excited and want to learn more. So
Exactly. Okay, well, can you remind me on time? Do we have—
yeah, sorry, it's 10:31.
Okay, we will go through this next deck very quickly because again, this is even more simple than the past. It's just going to give you another example. I'll go through it really quickly, but company called Reflect, reimagining in-person therapy through data. Honestly, I think they could get a little bit more specific about what that means. I think it's a bit too broad, but these next two slides I love. This is their problem slide. Like, I have never seen a more simple, like, I have anxiety. Same. Like, I would say probably 90% of the population is going to be like, I want to know what's on the next slide, right?
Totally.
So this is the problem at large. Then they dig a little bit deeper. So it's too hard to get help for people who have anxiety or depression, whatever. 80% do not find the right therapist, and the number of sessions per person is 1. Again, not left a lot of questions here. Then they start to throw in a dollar amount, which hints at the market. 35 billion lost therapy revenue. Great. Bet you they're going to talk about how they're going to solve that. Boom. In-person therapy driven by data. Again, this isn't talking about how it's, the tech behind it. It's talking about what it is, how it's delivered. Again, more statistics, right? So maybe they actually don't have any capital right now or any revenue, but they have this. This is manipulating your story so that you can explain the really crucial parts that make that wow them is really important. No questions on the recurring revenue model, incredibly simple. Great. Now we do find out how much revenue they do have, 20% monthly gross, incredible. Talk about the team. And then at the very end, they have a let's reflect, which is very cute for play on words. And I also, once you're in person with the investor, having something up on the screen that they can refer back to that doesn't distract them, but kind of reminds them oh, wow, yeah, they have 50K monthly in bookings while they're talking. It's just nice to have. So that kind of ends our pitch today. It was awesome. That was so fun. I'm glad that I kept it consolidated because sometimes I can go on and on. And I hope that was useful. I'm open for questions now, unless you wanted to touch on anything else, Will?
Yeah, let's do some questions. I mean, that last deck is so simple and it's so compelling. I love that one too. It's just they really were economical with their words. I have anxiety, too hard to treat. It's they've got 3 or 4 words on each slide, and I know I'm not beating a dead horse because we still see so many ugly pitch decks and decks with tons of words and arrows, but the more you can just distill it down, the better, in my experience. So yeah, let's take some questions. Let's see, I'm going to scroll up here. Will the recording be posted? Yes, we will be posting it. Gavin says, I missed the last point. Can you repeat about 200 investors? Somebody else said, yeah, because you said it used to take 100 meetings. Now maybe it's 200. Do you have anything else to say on that, Mel?
No, it's just it's going to take longer right now because of the market that we're in.
Right. So all the more reason to have a really badass deck that gets people excited. All right, let's see what else we got here. What is the future of pitch decks? This is from Annie Jane. Sorry if I'm getting your name pronunciation wrong. What is the future of pitch decks, and with platforms coming up which directly link to your bank/systems to monitor or pre-audit? So, okay, so right, there's sometimes you can send an investor a link that shows live traction or live metrics, and he's asking, what is the future of pitch decks? What do you think?
Got it. Make it as easy on the investor as possible. If I've seen people put in a laptop screen with a little YouTube play button with their demo in it. Just remember that the more clicks, the harder it is to kind of keep them engaged, right? It's like someone kind of digging down deeper into your website. They're less likely to keep going down the rabbit hole. I also, if you have some killer stats, that's awesome, but you could just as easily put that in written form. I also recommend putting it on DocSend so you can see or DocSend or something similar to DocSend, so you can see who is watching it. Let's say you see 20 investors stop looking at your deck after slide 3. Maybe something to look at and be like, great, I should probably make slide 3 more engaging. So that way you can kind of track it. But yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. I have a question. You've just done, I think, 7 decks for our fundraising mastery founders in our current cohort. What was that process like? And are there any themes that came out, things you saw over and over again in doing those 7 decks for our founders? Totally.
And we keep our cohort small. So that's almost more than half of them. let me reflect on this for a second. I think helping guide, well, I call it business plan massaging, where it's like, before we even get to your deck, like be really clear about what your product is, what the value add is, and its impact, right? And then from there, it gets easier to distill it down. But until you get to that point, it's hard. So I work with founders a lot of the time, just starting with like, this doesn't make sense. Are you sure that this is the market? Are you, like kind of prying and digging a little bit deeper, which again comes from the venture experience, right? And then being able to create something that's clean, concise, and compelling. I think that's kind of been where founders have gotten stuck. And especially just, it's, who did we have? I think we had like a 40 slide deck. And it's like, okay, slow down. We don't need all of that information here. We can extrapolate. And then working with them to also really distill down the product. I think working on product, making it less chaotic in terms of it goes from this to this to this to this to this, like just some insane, map, like a crime map that goes back and forth. That's been really,
yeah. So getting that, like, I love the business plan massage idea of, it's really about the conversation and writing down in the most distilled, simplified way possible exactly what the opportunity is, like what's being built and what's the opportunity, and then translating it into slides.
Yeah.
Jonathan Chang asks, is there anything in 2023 compared to last year that you think investors will be more locked in on, especially given the current fundraising environment, maybe like traction, revenue, question mark?
Yeah. I think one thing that I will say across the board, there are so many things that you can do to build or create before you ask for funding. If you go out and you're like, I need, I don't know, $100,000 so I can go out and do this market research. Do you really? Like, how much effort have you put in on your back end to be able to go and find out the information that you need? Maybe it's like a really crappy beta product that you build with someone you find, online for really cheap, to be able to create something that you can just give to people to be like, would you use this? They want to see scrappiness now more than ever. And if you don't have revenue or you don't have strong data points, it's going to be really hard for them to want to invest in just an idea, right? So even if you don't have the revenue, pull in as much as you can to bring in those LOIs, validate your beta model, whatever you can to really help back you up, because investing in just ideas is getting harder and harder and harder. So that would be my thing. Yeah, focusing on traction and revenue.
Yeah, my little addendum to that is like, what can you do to prove traction without launching the full product? There's almost always something you can do.
Yeah.
It's just interviewing people, getting LOIs, collecting data. So that's
okay, Jonathan did a little edit here for what to focus on in the pitch deck. I think this kind of it goes back to talking about your traction. There were some people in our cohort, right, that they're pre-revenue. So what case studies do you have that worked before? These are our testimonials from people who have tried our product over the last 5 months, or these are our organic SEO impressions over the last 4 weeks compared to Q4 2020. Whatever you can, distill it down, make it really attractive, which takes a lot of thinking to think like, okay, I don't have revenue. What else can I show them? That would be the most important one. Great. No, I do not mean without traction, there's no point in pitching to investors.
Do you mean, no, I said, do you mean without traction? There's no point in pitching to investors, question mark. That's a different person though. Different question.
Yes. I would say it's difficult to, if you have absolutely nothing except an idea, it's going to be difficult to get the funding right now. So, but what you can do is put in some grunt work on your end, I think without funding, to be able to kind of get the ball rolling and show them something. Nice. Yeah, do that beta testing, get it out into the world. Oh, another thing I see people do is they make something and then they think they know that it works for, like, they think they know the market, they think they have product market fit, then they go out and test it and it's like, it falls to pieces, right? So like, do the market research before, do the customer research before, like really take the time to slow down and be like, will people use this? Make a really shitty MVP, send it out, take that data, and then from there start to build something. But don't just go into it blind. Take the time and slow down your process. It'll save you a lot of time later on, and investors at the end of the day will have more conviction in you.
Great. I got another question from Gavin here. And founders, we've got, looks like around over 40 founders on the call. So if you have questions, please type them in here and we'll get to as many as we can. So question from Gavin. Thank you, Melanie. Excellent presentation. I have a question. When it comes to the TAM, SAM, SOM, how purist should founders be with the figures? For example, if we found that there are 115,000 media companies in the UK, but one team member is insistent that the figure is altered to 52,000 because that's the number of trading media companies in the UK. So I think he's asking, do we use the 115,000 biggest number or the 52,000, which is more purist? Kind of, do you get the question?
You go. No, you go.
Yeah. So the question is like, say you're selling, say you've got a product for moms. Well, should you include in your TAM all the moms in the country, or should it just be all the moms of a certain demographic that's going to be addressable for your market, or should it be all the moms of a certain demographic of a certain age, because that'll change your TAM? And I think my advice is to just go big with the TAM to demonstrate the size of the market, because the upside is what investors are thinking about. So I would say go big with the TAM and then whittle it down with the SAM and the SOM and provide the data like Melanie showed in that example deck. That'd be my answer. What do you think, Mel?
Perfect.
Yeah. Go big, because remember, the downside is they lose all their money. So the downside is the same for every investment opportunity. And so you really do need to show that there's a big upside. And if you are raising investor money, there has to be that big upside. All right, what other questions do we have here?
I love Ani. Have you tried ChatGPT? Where'd it go? Have you tried ChatGPT 3 to make deck, script, or copy? How did it go? No, but we should try that. I have no idea how that would be. It looks like someone down here that Renee did, and there was an LMAO after it. So I'm going to assume that didn't go well. Maybe talk with Renee. Again, what you're providing to ChatGPT 3 is what's going on inside your head and giving it over to a robot. Passing it over to someone like me, someone who's been an investor and can look at it holistically, to be able to distill it down into points that actually make sense for someone who's been in that seat. So I doubt that an AI, maybe eventually, but I don't think that's the way to do it. But I'm curious to see if Renee has any more comments on that. What is the slide people get wrong most, which is the one slide which most people don't have, but is a game changer? I think at the end of the day, no matter how much an investor tells you that we only invest in mission-driven ideas, we only invest in I don't know, like DEI, like it all comes down to capital. How much can you make them, and when are you going to exit? So if you can kind of keep that in the back of your mindset, like, we live in a capitalistic society, you want to like slam as much as possible into those traction, into putting in thought into your financials, to really give a clear idea about how you're going to make them X amount of money in X amount of time. The idea is great, like the problem and the solution is great, but really hitting home with those numbers and statistics. You saw with that last deck, Reflect, they were throwing in numbers from slide 1, right? To kind of hint at the investor for how large this market is and how big the opportunity is. Will, do you have anything to add to that?
The slide most people get wrong. I mean, one thing that I see is people including their colleges, like what college they went to on the team slide. And that always feels kind of amateurish to me. So I just point that out. I would say it's like the first slide. You want to be on the first slide, you want to communicate first or second, you want to communicate exactly what it is you do. And if you don't communicate that without any ambiguity, clearly, concisely, then you're screwed, because then the investor is going to be wondering the whole time, what is this? And they get to the end of the deck and then they'll they'll just pass. So that'd be my answer for that one.
Cool.
We got one from Ned here. What are your thoughts on financial projections for early stage companies where there are still question marks? Do you generally like to see charted projections? And if so, should those projections be more detailed or scaled by quarterly? Scaled by quarter. What's your thoughts on
so when I say financial projections, do this for yourself so that you have a good idea. Well, I'm going to reflect back to that slide where it said click here. And originally, as an investor, I said, I love this. I want to see their financial projections. Now, from where I'm sitting helping founders, don't do that. This is so that you can get a really clear idea of what you can build for the investor, right? And how far you can take it. What we do is a business model, right? We do it for like the next 5 years. So 2023 to 2027, try and make it look like hockey stick growth. Put in your LTV, your CAC, and your unit economics. So keep it simple, but this is more just like for you to really be able to understand, because I feel like people don't necessarily go through their business model as clearly as they should in the beginning.
I'm going to find another question.
Robot says, just summarize. I had no clue what. Okay, that's chat GPT. Is it worth speaking about exit opportunities? Also, don't talk about comparable deals and rounds that have been raised in the space if it's too close to what you're doing, right? Like you're gonna have to talk about the competitive landscape. Come up with your differentiators, if anything, for like look at all of the people in your space. Continue to poke holes in your story until you're able to come up with differentiators against these people, right? Because if they're seeing, I don't know, OpenAI compared to you, like what is your moat? What is your defense there? So sorry, I'm just pausing there to say definitely think about your differentiators and keep poking to make sure that they're there. And don't talk about comparable deals if it's too close. I don't know. What do you think about the first part of that question, Will?
Is it worth talking about exit opportunities in the pitch deck? I think it's too much too soon. Like, yeah, I think that in your initial deck, you really just want to get a meeting. Like the whole point of the deck is to get a meeting. And talking about an exit feels like something that's further down the line where the investor's already invested or they're thinking about it. So I would probably leave that slide. I think it's a great slide to have because you might get asked that in a meeting, but I would leave it for a later part of the process.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, some more questions from the folks on the line. We have a few more minutes here. So if you have a question, please toss it in the chat and we'll answer it. What do you think is the most important thing for founders to keep in mind when they're creating their pitch deck, Mel?
I was reading the chat. Can you say it one more time?
Oh, yeah, what do you think are the most important things for founders to keep in mind when they're thinking about, when they're either creating their pitch deck themselves or they're having somebody like you create it?
I really think it comes down to, and this is why this is like a huge part. It's really difficult. Like this is why we have fundraising mastery, and this is why we have me with investment experience to help build these. Is like in your mind, in a founder's mind, there's so much going on and there's so much that you want to share and it's so exciting and you really want them to understand all of it. And that's not the point of this. Like, that's not the point of these decks. It's really just to produce this like fear of missing out. And to do that, it takes distilling this down and making it clear, concise, and simple. And every single founder that I have ever met has not started out with something clear, concise, and simple in their head for how they describe their own company. So for that, ask the people, like, please come join us, and ask the people around you, does this make sense? Like, don't be humble, don't get offended, right? And ask the people around you, I'd love your honest feedback on how this sounds. How did my 5-word one-liner land on you? Was it good? Because while it might make sense to you, there are a lot of things that probably won't make sense to an investor. And again, people are always like, well, I only want investors in my space. Great. And I think you're narrowing down too many people, right? And it doesn't matter how technical they are. You want to make it as simple for them to understand the value as possible in the shortest amount of time. Hope
All
that
right, Paul
answers
has a
it.
question here. What if your solution solves many problems, both for consumers and for businesses, where consumers will be the primary users of your solution, but businesses are what pays your bills? Should you focus on one side in a pitch or both sides?
Both. Supply demand, right? Where consumers will be the primary users of your solution, but businesses, well, yeah. So this is really just focusing on the structure of how this works, right? So if you're gonna, you have high supply, high demand. It's important to talk about both aspects because businesses are going to pay your bills, but why are they going to pay your bills?
Nice. All right, Ned asks, what are your thoughts on including an appendix at the end of pitch decks, specifically readable pitch decks, and what types of things are most helpful for investors to see in those appendices if included?
I love this question. And it just depends. I wish I had a better answer. I mean, like I also kind of give this as an opportunity, like for the email deck, don't necessarily send appendix. I don't know. I think just send them the 10 slide deck, send it their way, create an appendix for a larger one. This can be an opportunity for those things that, maybe Mel said, no, you don't need those 12 slides of product. You can put that in for like, hey, if maybe my technical investor does really want to understand how this works and like the equations behind whatever, then you can put it in your appendix so they can see it. And I also had someone where it's like let's say, you're going to meet with hundreds of investors, right? They're bound to ask you a question you don't know the answer to. At the end of that investor meeting, figure out the answer to it and throw it into the appendix so that at the end, when you're presenting, the next time someone asks you that question, you can be like, great, so glad you asked that. Let me go to page 72 in my appendix. Just kidding. Please don't ever do a 72-page appendix. And I can talk about it. So.
Great. Well, we just have a few minutes left, so I want to make sure everyone's aware of our pitch deck service and of Fundraising Mastery. So Mel, we usually charge $2,000 to get somebody to get a pitch deck done, and we have a special offer today where you can save $500 if you want Mel to do your pitch deck. So for only $1,500, you get a completed, finalized pitch deck, and I'll pass it over to you, Mel. I'm going to post the link in the chat for anybody who's interested. But yeah, do you want to just talk about that?
Totally. Again, this goes back to the value behind, like, at the end of the day, a pitch deck is what's going to help you make the capital that you need. You can have someone on Upwork design you something. That doesn't mean that it's going to make sense to an investor. So, the real value of bringing somebody like me on is to give you that perspective from what an investor really wants to see and hear. And also a special talent to come at this from a holistic viewpoint and be like, okay, we don't need this in there, pull out this, pull out that. It's harder than you think. So, someone to kind of guide you through that process is great. And every single one of our founders has loved our pitch decks. There are some testimonials on my LinkedIn, my website. So, yeah, I would love to help you guys. I'm going to put my email in here too, so you can email me afterwards. And yeah, book it. Let's do it. And I'll pass it back over to Will.
Yeah, I just put the link there. So this is something we just started doing, and our founders have all been super stoked about the decks that Mel has created. And yeah, I think it's an incredible value. And I wish that I had a service like this when I was a founder, because I spent hours and hours and hours designing my deck, redesigning my deck. And yeah, I think it's a really great service for the entrepreneurial community. And then just a reminder to everybody that we are in our early enrollment period for Fundraising Mastery right now, which is our 90-day accelerator program that focuses on getting you funded. And we have early applications open until February 14th, till Valentine's Day. And so if you're interested, it's best to apply now, because it saves our team the mad rush that always happens as we come up to the launches of our cohorts. And as a thank you for applying early, you get a discount on the fee, and you also get free coaching with me and a free coaching call with Mel. So it's a great value, and that's only till the 14th. And you can go to our site. Actually, I'll toss the link in here in a minute and fill out a quick 2-minute application. There's a question: how long will it take you to get it done, Mel? So I think it says on the page, but how long does it take for you to turn these around?
We can always expedite it for higher cost, and it takes we do 2 iterations. So we'll do V1 together, right? I'm going to need some collateral from you. We'll meet. And then from there, I produce V1. We sit down again together, make sure that there's nothing blaring missing. And then from there, I produce V2. So in total, it's around 2 to 2.5 weeks.
Great. Any other questions about the pitch deck service? That's a great prompt. If anybody else has questions, you can email Melanie if we don't get to answer your questions today. I'm going to post the link for Fundraising Mastery if anybody's interested. There's that link.
There's my link. Oops. I'll also just say that, like, this is fun. It's fun to work with people so you don't feel like so alone in this process. Like, it's daunting and it's terrifying and it's frustrating. And there's just huge value with working people in your community that like are excited to help you. That's why I joined Fulcrum, is like our goal is to just help founders fundraise. So anyways, this was awesome. Thanks for having me speak, Will.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mel. And thanks everyone on the call. I think that was a great session. So I think we're going to post the recording so people can watch back. And if you have any questions about pitch decks, you can email Melanie at melanie@fulcrumventureaccelerator.com. You can email me at william@fulcrumventureaccelerator.com if you have questions for me. And yeah, thanks everyone. That was a great session. Thank you, Mel.
Yeah, thanks guys. Have a good one.
All right, bye everyone.
Bye.
See you on the internet.
See you on the internet.